The old space station floated in silence. Tejo pressed his gloved hand against the airlock door and watched the indicator light turn green. The door opened with a hiss that sounded too loud in the empty corridor beyond. "Careful," his partner Minji said through the radio. "This place has been abandoned for over 200 years. Tejo stepped inside. His boots clicked against the metal floor. The air was thin but breathable. Emergency lights flickered along the walls, casting strange shadows. He moved forward slowly. Checking each room as he passed, he was a xenohistorian. His job was to find and preserve the histories of alien species. This station had appeared on old star maps, but nobody had visited it in centuries. When Tejo finally got permission to explore it, he jumped at the chance. The third room he checked was different. Computer terminals lined the walls. Most were dark and dead, but one screen still glowed with a faint blue light. Tejo approached it carefully. Text scrolled across the screen in a language he didn't recognize. "Minji, I found something," he said. "Sending you the data now." He connected his portable scanner to the terminal. Data began flowing into his device. The translation software worked for several minutes before words appeared that he could read. Journal entry, day 7489. "My name is HFY. I am the last of my kind." Tejo's breath caught in his throat. He sat down in the ancient chair and began to read. HFY had been part of a species called the Velen. She described her people as peaceful and thoughtful. They loved art and philosophy. They had no weapons and no armies. When disputes arose between star systems, the Velen would travel there and help everyone talk through their problems. For thousands of years this worked perfectly. Then the Kresh Empire arrived. The Kresh were conquerors. They moved from star to star, taking what they wanted. They gave every species they met the same choice: surrender and serve or die. Most species chose to surrender. A few tried to fight and were destroyed quickly. The Velen believed they could negotiate. They sent their best diplomats to talk with the Kresh. They explained that violence was unnecessary, that all beings could live together in peace. The Kresh listened patiently to everything the Velen had to say. Then they attacked. HFY's journal described what happened next in painful detail. The Kresh fleet surrounded Valara Prime, the Velen homeworld. They demanded complete surrender. The Velen refused to fight but also refused to become slaves. They believed the Kresh would eventually see reason. The bombardment lasted 3 days. When it ended, every city on Valara Prime was burning. The Kresh landed soldiers to eliminate any survivors. They were efficient and thorough. Within 3 months, the Velen were extinct, all except HFY. She had been away from home when it happened. She was on a research mission, studying ancient ruins on a dead world at the edge of Velen space. By the time she received the distress signals and returned, everything was over. Her planet was a graveyard. Her people were gone. She was alone. Tejo read entry after entry. HFY spent years moving from place to place, hiding from Kresh patrols. She watched as the Empire expanded. She documented each species that fell. The Mirathi were conquered in a month. The Quellan Federation lasted almost a year before surrendering. Dozens of smaller species were absorbed without anyone noticing. "Why don't they fight back?" HFY wrote in one entry. "Why does everyone just accept this?" But Tejo understood. The Kresh were too powerful. Their ships were too advanced. Their weapons were too destructive. Fighting them was suicide. Surrender at least meant survival, even if it meant living as slaves. HFY's entries became darker as the years passed. She wrote about loneliness. She wrote about despair. She wrote about watching the galaxy slowly die, conquered one world at a time, and being completely powerless to stop it. Then, in her later entries, something changed. Journal entry, day 73101. "I detected unusual transmissions today. They came from a star system the Kresh haven't reached yet. The signals are primitive compared to galactic standard technology. Radio waves mostly, but there are so many of them. Whoever these people are, they talk a lot." Tejo leaned closer to the screen. He knew which star system she meant. She was talking about Earth. She was talking about humans. HFY continued to monitor the transmissions. She learned that this species called themselves humans. They had only recently developed spaceflight. They were still confined to their own star system, building stations and exploring their neighboring planets. "They seem curious," she wrote. "They send probes to every corner of their system. They ask questions constantly. They argue with each other over everything. They are noisy and chaotic and full of life. I wonder how long that will last. The entries after that were shorter and less frequent. HFY was running out of power. Her station was failing. She knew she didn't have much time left. Journal entry, day 745. The humans have developed faster than light travel, crude but functional. They sent a ship beyond their system today. The crash will notice them soon. Another species will fall. Another light will go out. I'm so tired of watching this happen. Journal entry, day 7460. First contact occurred 3 days ago. The crash sent the humans their standard ultimatum. I translated the human response. They rejected it. They actually said no. Don't they understand what happens to species that say no? Journal entry, day 7461. There was a battle. I monitored the transmissions. The crash attacked with a patrol fleet. The humans had only one ship. I thought it would be over quickly. But the humans fought back. They fought back and they won. How is that possible? Nobody defeats the crash. Nobody. Tejo's hands were shaking as he scrolled through the remaining entries. There were only a few left. Journal entry, day 7465. More battles. The humans keep fighting. They're calling for help from their homeworld. They're preparing for war. Don't they understand? You can't fight the crash, you can only die. Journal entry, day 7489. I'm dying. My station is failing and I'm too weak to repair it. I thought I would die in despair like my people did. But today I heard something impossible. The crash sent their full battle fleet to the human homeworld. 300 ships. The humans had less than 50. It should have been a massacre. But the humans won. They actually won. They destroyed most of the crash fleet. The survivors are fleeing. I don't understand how this happened. I don't understand how one primitive species could do what all the great civilizations of the galaxy could not. But they did it. They fought back and they won. For the first time in 20 years, I feel something I thought was dead. I feel hope. That was the last entry. Tejo sat in the darkness of the ancient station, staring at the screen. HFY had died here alone, but she had died with hope. She had died knowing that someone, somewhere, had finally stood up to the monsters. He thought about the date of that last entry. It was recorded over 200 years ago, shortly after humanity's first major war with the Kresh Empire. HFY had witnessed the beginning of everything that came after. Minji. Tejo said quietly, "Get the ship ready. I need to file a report. This story needs to be told." He looked around the small room where HFY had spent her final days. She deserved better than to be forgotten in the darkness. She deserved to be remembered. "I promise," he said to the empty room. "Everyone will know what you witnessed. Everyone will know that you were here." Captain Hyun stood on the bridge of the UHSN Defiance and watched the stars. His crew worked quietly at their stations. The ship hummed with power. Everything was running smoothly. They were 5 light-years from Earth, exploring a region marked as empty on their star charts. Humans had been traveling faster than light for only 5 years. The galaxy was still new and exciting to them. Every mission felt like an adventure. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Officer G1 from the sensor station. "Multiple contacts heading our way." Hyun walked over to look at the display. 6 ships were approaching. They were large and angular, nothing like human designs. Their hulls were dark and covered in weapon ports. "Hail them," Hyun ordered. Standard first contact protocol. The communications officer sent out greeting messages in every language humans had learned. Mathematical proofs, scientific data, images showing peaceful intent. For several minutes there was no response. Then the enemy ships opened fire. The Defiance shook violently. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed across every panel. Shields holding at 60%, G1 called out. "They're using some kind of plasma weapons." "Return fire," Hyun commanded. All weapons. The Defiance had been built for deep space exploration, but after humanity's first few encounters with other species, the military had added weapons. Lots of weapons. Railguns, missile pods, and point defense systems. Humans didn't trust the galaxy to stay peaceful. Tungsten slugs shot from the railguns at incredible speed. They crossed the distance in seconds and slammed into the lead enemy ship. The impacts punched straight through its shields and tore into the hull. Atmosphere vented into space. The enemy ships seemed surprised. They changed formation and attacked from different angles. More plasma fire hammered the Defiance. Shields down to 30%, G1 reported. Hull breaches on decks 7 and 9. Launch missiles, Hyun said. Target the damaged ship. Nuclear-tipped missiles streaked toward the wounded enemy vessel. Its point defense systems shot down most of them, but 3 got through. The explosions were brilliant white flashes. When they cleared, the enemy ship was breaking apart. The remaining 5 ships pulled back slightly. Then a communication signal came through. A translated message appeared on the screen. You are in violation of Kresh Empire space. You will surrender your vessel immediately or be destroyed. Hyun read the message twice. Then he composed his response carefully. This is Captain Hyun of the United Human Space Navy. We claim no territory and recognize no empire. We came in peace. You attacked without warning. You have 1 hour to withdraw, or we will consider your continued presence an act of war. There was a long pause. Then a new message arrived. Your species is unknown to us. You will submit to Kresh authority. You will provide all technical data about your ships and weapons. You will reveal the location of your homeworld. Compliance is not optional. Hyun felt cold anger settle in his chest. He had read about species like this in Earth's own history. Empires that took what they wanted and called it order. Bullies who expected everyone to bow down. Negative, he sent back. Withdraw now or face destruction. The Kresh response was immediate. All 5 ships opened fire at once. The Defiance's shields collapsed completely. Energy weapons tore into the armor. Hull plating melted and exploded. The ship's main reactor went into emergency shutdown. We're dead in space, Jiwon said. Multiple system failures. They're moving in for the kill. Hyun looked at his crew, young faces scared but determined. He thought about Earth. He thought about every human colony. If the Kresh reached human space, they would do to Earth what they had probably done to countless other worlds. Transfer all remaining power to weapons, he ordered. Full salvo, everything we have. Captain, that will drain our life support, the engineer protested. We'll have less than an hour of air. Do it, Hyun said firmly. The Defiance couldn't move, but its weapons still worked. Every railgun fired at once. Every remaining missile launched. Every point defense gun targeted the enemy ships. The Kresh weren't expecting such a desperate attack. They were too close, confident in their superiority. The wall of projectiles hit them like a hammer. One ship lost its engines and began spinning out of control. Another took a railgun slug straight through its bridge. A third ship's shields overloaded and its hull cracked open. The 2 remaining Kresh vessels tried to retreat, but more missiles chased them down. One made it to safety. The other exploded in a ball of fire. The bridge was silent except for the sound of failing systems. The Defiance was dying, but 4 Kresh ships were dead and 1 had fled. Get a message to Earth, Hyun ordered. Tell them everything that happened here. Tell them we encountered a hostile empire. Tell them to prepare for war. It took 3 hours for a human rescue ship to arrive. By then, the Defiance crew was down to their last minutes of air. But the message had been sent. Earth Command received every detail of the encounter. Admiral, Nari read the report in her office on Luna Base. She was the highest-ranking officer in the United Human Space Navy. She had fought in Earth's last major war 30 years ago. She had hoped humanity was done with wars. How many ships do we have? She asked her staff. 42 combat-capable vessels, an officer replied. Most are like the Defiance, exploration ships with weapons added. We have 8 purpose-built warships. And intelligence suggests the Kresh have thousands of ships, another officer added. Their empire spans over 70 star systems. They have resources we can't match. Nari stood and walked to the window. Earth hung in the black sky, blue and beautiful. Billions of people lived there. Billions more in the colonies. We have 2 choices, she said. We can try to negotiate. Offer them something in exchange for peace. Maybe they'll accept us as a client species. We lose our freedom, but we survive. She turned to face her staff. Her eyes were hard. Or we fight. We make them pay for every light year. We show them that humans don't surrender. We make them regret ever finding us. Admiral, they outnumber us hundreds to 1, someone protested. Yes, Nari agreed. But they don't know us yet. They don't know that we've been fighting each other for thousands of years. They don't know that we've built weapons designed to destroy entire planets. They don't know that when you threaten a human's home, they will do absolutely anything to protect it. She picked up the report and placed it on her desk. Send orders to every ship. Pull back to defensive positions around Earth and the colonies. Start converting civilian vessels for military use. Activate all reserve personnel. And begin building more ships. If the Kresh want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. What about the other species? an officer asked. The ones the Kresh have conquered. Should we try to contact them? Nari thought about that. The Kresh Empire had been expanding for centuries. How many species had they crushed? How many civilizations had they destroyed? Send out transmissions on all frequencies, she decided. Tell them that humanity is fighting back. Tell them that if they rise up against their oppressors, we'll support them. The Kresh rule through fear. Let's give them something to fear. The orders went out within the hour. Across human space, the mobilization began. Miners became soldiers. Cargo ships became carriers. Orbital factories retooled to produce weapons instead of consumer goods. Earth had been at peace for 3 decades. That peace was over. In a repair dock near Mars, Captain Hyun watched as engineers worked on the Defiance. The ship had taken massive damage, but it could be fixed. He had volunteered to stay with it. She's a tough ship, an engineer told him. Give us a month and she'll be spaceworthy again. Hyun nodded. He thought about the Kresh ships they had destroyed. He thought about the one that got away. That ship would report back to its empire. They would tell their leaders about humans, about the species that fought back. Make it 2 weeks, Hyun said. We'll need every ship we can get. The war was coming. The Kresh didn't know it yet, but they had made a terrible mistake. They had attacked humans expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had awakened something that the galaxy hadn't seen before. They had awakened humanity's wrath. Commander Suji floated in zero gravity at the center of Defense Station Alpha. Holographic displays surrounded her, showing every ship and weapon platform in the Sol system. She had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. Now it was here. Contact, her sensor operator called out. Multiple jump signatures at the system's edge, counting. 287 ships. Suji felt her stomach tighten. Intelligence had predicted 300. They were close. All stations, this is command, she broadcast. The Kresh fleet has arrived. Execute protocol scorched stars, everyone knows their jobs. Make them pay for every kilometer. Across the system, humanity prepared for war. 40 human warships moved into attack positions. Another 60 converted civilian vessels loaded with weapons took supporting positions. The asteroid belt had been transformed into a fortress. Mining stations now bristled with railguns. Automated weapon platforms floated among the rocks, waiting silently. The Kresh fleet advanced in perfect formation. Their ships were beautiful in a terrible way. Sleek hulls covered in glowing energy weapons, shields that shimmered like soap bubbles. They had been conquering the galaxy for centuries. They moved with absolute confidence. They're broadcasting, the communications officer said. A message appeared on Suji's display. It was simple and direct. Surrender now. Reveal all military assets. Prepare for occupation. Resistance will result in total extinction. Suji deleted the message without responding. She opened a channel to all human forces. Remember what we're fighting for, she said quietly. Our families. Our homes. Our freedom. The Kresh think they can take that from us. Let's show them what humanity does to bullies. The Kresh fleet reached the orbit of Neptune. They began accelerating toward the inner system. Toward Earth. All ships, weapons free, Suji commanded. Fire at will. The battle began. Human ships darted forward in small groups, avoiding the main Kresh formation. They fired railguns and missiles, then retreated behind the shelter of Neptune's moons. The Kresh returned fire with plasma weapons that lit up space like small suns. 2 human ships took direct hits and exploded. But the Kresh were learning something important. Human weapons were different. Plasma could be deflected by shields designed for energy weapons. But solid tungsten moving at a fraction of light speed? That punched right through. A Kresh battleship took a railgun slug through its engine section. The ship broke apart in a cascade of explosions. Another took 3 nuclear missiles to its shield generators. When its shields collapsed, point defense lasers cut it to pieces. The Kresh adapted quickly. They increased shield strength and changed formation to minimize exposure. But doing so slowed them down. Every minute they spent reorganizing was another minute for humans to prepare the next surprise. Near Uranus, a converted cargo ship called the Pacific Dream flew directly at a group of Kresh cruisers. The enemy targeted it with their weapons, expecting an easy kill. At the last moment, the Pacific Dream's crew evacuated in escape pods. The ship continued on autopilot. Its cargo hold was filled with 50 nuclear warheads. The explosion vaporized 6 Kresh ships and damaged a dozen more. The shockwave sent debris spinning through space. The Kresh fleet scattered, their perfect formation breaking apart. Direct hit, someone cheered on the command channel. The crazy bastards actually did it. But there was no time to celebrate. The Kresh were already recovering. They pushed forward again, more cautious now but still advancing. They outnumbered humanity's forces 5-1. They could afford losses. The battle moved inward, past Saturn, past Jupiter. Every step of the way, humans made them bleed. Officer Ki-hoon commanded a squadron of fast attack ships near the asteroid belt. His job was simple, be annoying. His 12 ships darted between the asteroids, firing and retreating, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Enemy formation approaching belt entrance, his sensor officer reported. Ki-hoon smiled. The Kresh were about to learn why you don't rush into an asteroid field. Activate the mines, he ordered. Thousands of small objects that looked like ordinary asteroids suddenly lit up. They were bombs. Nuclear bombs, chemical explosives, and old-fashioned proximity mines. The Kresh fleet sailed right into them. The explosions cascaded through their formation. Ships collided with each other, trying to escape. Some crashed into actual asteroids. Others simply disappeared in balls of fire. When the debris cleared, 40 Kresh ships were gone. The survivors pulled back, their formation in chaos, but still they came. The Kresh Empire had conquered 70 star systems. They had destroyed countless species. They would not be stopped by one system's defenses. The battle reached Mars. Human colonies on the Red Planet evacuated to underground shelters. Automated defense platforms in Mars orbit opened fire on the approaching fleet. The Kresh destroyed them methodically, one by one. Admiral Nari watched from Luna Base, her heart heavy. They were losing. Slowly, steadily, they were being pushed back. Earth was the next line of defense. If the Kresh reached Earth, it was over. Admiral, we're receiving transmissions, a communications officer said. Not from the Kresh, from somewhere else. Nari turned to look at the display. Messages were arriving from deep space. They were in dozens of different languages, but the translation software could handle them. Humanity, we hear you fighting. We are enslaved by the Kresh. If you can defeat them, we will rise up. We have been conquered. We thought resistance was impossible. You are giving us hope. Don't surrender. Please don't surrender. You are the first to truly fight back. Nari felt tears in her eyes. They weren't alone. There were others out there suffering under Kresh rule, watching humanity's desperate battle. Broadcast a response, she ordered. Tell them we won't quit. Tell them to be ready. When we win this, we're coming for them. Admiral, an officer said hesitantly. If we win? When? Nari corrected firmly. When we win. The Kresh fleet reached Earth orbit 3 days after entering the system. They had started with 287 ships. They now had 119. They had lost more ships in 3 days than they had lost in the last 50 years. But they were here. And humanity had only 15 operational warships left. Commander Suji activated the final phase of Protocol Scorched Stars. If Earth fell, hidden missiles across the system would launch. Each one carried relativistic kill vehicles, projectiles that would accelerate to 90% of light speed and slam into Kresh worlds. Even if humanity died, the Kresh Empire would burn. They're broadcasting again, communications reported. The message was different this time. The Kresh offered terms. Surrender now and they would spare Earth's population. Most of them anyway. Humans would become a client species. They would serve, but they would survive. Suji thought about that. She thought about her daughter in Seattle, her brother in New Shanghai, all the people she loved. She could save them. All she had to do was give up. Send them my response, she told communications. Tell them to go to hell. The Kresh attacked in full force. Every weapon they had fired at once. Earth's orbital defenses opened up in response. Space became a storm of fire. Captain Hyun brought the repaired Defiance into the battle. His ship was patched and improvised, barely holding together, but its weapons worked. He targeted a Kresh carrier and fired everything he had. Officer Yuna commanded a defense station that was already crippled and burning. When Kresh soldiers attempted to board, she vented the atmosphere and engaged them in zero gravity. Hand-to-hand combat, something the Kresh had never experienced. They retreated in confusion. Ki-hoon's squadron made suicide runs against Kresh command ships. 3 of his pilots died taking out enemy fleet coordinators. The Kresh formation began to fall apart. And slowly, impossibly, the tide turned. The Kresh had never fought an enemy like this. Species they conquered were peaceful or disorganized. They surrendered quickly or fought clumsily. But humans had been practicing war for thousands of years. They knew every dirty trick. They used every advantage. More importantly, humans refused to quit. Even when defeat seemed certain, they kept fighting. Ships that were dead in space still fired their weapons. Stations that were breached still functioned. Soldiers who were wounded still fought. The Kresh had the better technology, but humans had the better motivation. On the 6th day of the Battle of Sol, the Kresh fleet commander made a decision. They had come with 287 ships. They now had 74. They had lost 213 vessels trying to conquer one system. The cost was too high. For the first time in 300 years, the Kresh Empire retreated. The remaining ships fled the system at maximum speed. Human vessels tried to pursue, but they were too damaged. They could only watch as the enemy disappeared into faster-than-light travel. Commander Suji collapsed in her chair. Around her, the command center erupted in cheers and tears. They had won. Earth was safe, but the cost had been terrible. 31 human ships destroyed, 15,000 personnel dead. Earth orbit was a graveyard of shattered vessels and floating debris. Admiral Nari's message came through on all channels. To every human in this system, you have shown the galaxy something it hasn't seen in centuries. You have shown them that freedom is worth fighting for, that oppression can be resisted, that bullies can be defeated. The Kresh will come again. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Fleet Commander Hyun stood on the bridge of his new ship. The UHSN Retribution was nothing like the old Defiance. It was bigger, stronger, and built for one purpose: war. All ships report ready, Officer Yuna said from the tactical station. She had been promoted after her actions during the battle. A scar ran down the left side of her face from the boarding action she had survived. She never tried to hide it. Hyun looked at the tactical display. 100 human warships were arranged in attack formation. Behind them were supply vessels, medical ships, and troop transports. This was humanity's first offensive operation. Their target was the planet Quella Prime. The Kresh had conquered it 40 years ago. Intelligence reports said 5,000 Kresh soldiers occupied the planet, ruling over 6 million Quellan civilians. Begin the jump, Hyun ordered. The fleet disappeared from human space and reappeared near Quella Prime. Alarms immediately sounded on the Kresh defense platforms. We're being hailed, communications reported. The Kresh garrison commander wants to know our intentions. Hyun composed his message carefully. He made sure every Kresh vessel in the system would hear it. This is Fleet Commander Hyun of the United Human Space Navy. We are here to liberate Quella Prime. Kresh forces will withdraw immediately or be destroyed. This is your only warning. The response was predictable. The Kresh rejected the ultimatum. Their defense fleet moved to intercept. 12 Kresh ships against 100 human vessels. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Human railguns tore through the Kresh formation like paper. Nuclear missiles overwhelmed their point defenses. Within 20 minutes, every Kresh ship was destroyed or fleeing. The orbital platforms lasted another 10 minutes before they too were reduced to debris. But Hyun wasn't satisfied with just orbital superiority. The Kresh still had troops on the ground, and the Quellan people were still enslaved. Send in the Marines, he ordered. Dropships launched from the troop carriers. They descended through Quella Prime's atmosphere in tight formations. The Kresh tried to shoot them down, but human point defense systems protected the descent. Lieutenant Do Hyun led the first wave. His company of 200 Marines hit the ground outside the capital city. They expected heavy resistance. Instead, they found chaos. The Quellan people had heard Hyun's broadcast. They knew humans were coming, and they decided not to wait. All across the city, Quellan civilians were rising up. They attacked Kresh soldiers with improvised weapons. They sabotaged communication systems. They blocked roads and seized government buildings. 40 years of oppression was exploding into rage. This is Do Hyun to all units, the lieutenant broadcast. The locals are fighting back. Provide support. Arm them if they ask. Priority is neutralizing Kresh military assets. Human Marines spread through the city. When they encountered Kresh soldiers, they engaged them with overwhelming firepower. When they encountered Quellan rebels, they provided weapons and tactical support. Officer Ki-hoon had a different mission. He led a special operations team to the planet's main prison facility. Intelligence said the Kresh kept political prisoners there. Leaders who had opposed the occupation, People who could help organize the resistance. The prison was heavily guarded. Ki-hoon didn't waste time on subtlety. His team used shape charges to blow through the walls. They fought room by room, corridor by corridor. The crash guards were trained soldiers, but they were used to fighting unarmed prisoners, not elite human commandos. Cells are on the lower levels, Ki-hoon said. Move fast. They found hundreds of prisoners, Quellan intellectuals, former government officials, and resistance fighters. Many had been imprisoned for decades. They were weak and malnourished, but their spirits weren't broken. Can you walk? Ki-hoon asked an elderly Quellan who seemed to be a leader. I can run, the old alien replied, if it means freedom. Within 3 days, the Kresh occupation of Quella Prime was over. The garrison commander tried to establish a defensive perimeter around the planetary governor's palace. Human artillery bombardment destroyed it in an hour. The survivors surrendered. Hyun personally accepted the surrender. He made the terms clear. The Kresh would be taken as prisoners of war. They would be treated humanely, but they would face trial for any war crimes committed during their occupation. The Kresh commander looked at Hyun with something like disbelief. You won't execute us? We're not the Kresh, Hyun replied. We're better than that. The liberation of Quella Prime sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For 40 years, the Quellan people had been slaves. Now they were free, and it had taken humans only 3 days. Diplomat Do-hyun stayed behind to help establish a new Quellan government. His job was to teach them something the Kresh had tried to make them forget: how to rule themselves. The Kresh controlled everything, a Quellan official explained to him. They made all decisions. We just obeyed. We don't remember how to organize a government. You'll remember, Do-hyun assured them. It's like riding a bicycle. Once you learn, you never really forget. What's a bicycle? The Quellan asked. Do-hyun smiled. This was going to take some work. Meanwhile, the human fleet moved to the next target. And the next, one by one, Kresh-occupied worlds fell to human assault. The strategy was always the same. Overwhelming force from orbit. Marines on the ground. Support for local resistance. Freedom in days. The Marathi homeworld was liberated in 4 days. The Heskin colonies took a week, because they were spread across 3 planets. The Valori resistance fighters joined the humans in battle, and together they drove the Kresh from their system in 2 days. With each liberation, the human fleet grew stronger. Freed species contributed ships and soldiers. The Quellan had powerful manufacturing capabilities. The Marathi were expert engineers. The Valori knew how to fight in ways the Kresh couldn't predict. And with each defeat, the Kresh Empire grew weaker. Client species began rebelling. Kresh supply lines were cut. Garrison commanders found themselves isolated and surrounded. Officer Yuna led a task force to intercept a Kresh supply convoy. 20 cargo ships guarded by 15 warships. Her force had only 10 ships, but they had something the Kresh didn't: experience. Remember, she told her captains, they think in terms of formation and discipline. We think in terms of chaos and opportunity. Use that. The battle was vicious. Yuna's ships attacked from multiple angles, never staying in one place. They used asteroids for cover. They fired and retreated, then attacked from a different direction. The Kresh couldn't adapt fast enough. When it was over, all 20 cargo ships were captured. 10 Kresh warships were destroyed. 5 surrendered. Yuna's force lost 2 ships. She stood on the bridge looking at the captured supplies: food, medicine, weapons, ammunition. Enough to supply a dozen Kresh garrison worlds. Distribute it, she ordered. Send it to the liberated worlds. They need it more than the Kresh do. 2 years after the Battle of Sol, the map of the galaxy had changed. 30 former Kresh worlds were now free. 20 client species had joined the human-led coalition. The Kresh Empire, which had ruled unchallenged for 3 centuries, was collapsing. Admiral Nari reviewed the reports from her headquarters on Luna. The numbers were staggering. The coalition now fielded over 500 warships. More were being built every month. Former Kresh slaves were becoming soldiers. Enslaved worlds were becoming allies. How many Kresh worlds remain? She asked her staff. 43 under their direct control, an officer replied. But intelligence suggests many are considering surrender. Their empire is fracturing. Nari nodded slowly. They were winning. But the cost had been high. Thousands of humans had died in the liberation campaigns. Entire cities had been destroyed in the fighting. The war was taking its toll. Send a message to the Kresh homeworld, she decided. Offer them terms. Surrender now. face war crimes trials for their leaders, accept restrictions on their military, but survive. Make them understand that we're giving them a choice their victims never had. The message was sent. For 3 weeks there was no response. Then the Kresh homeworld replied. They rejected the offer. They would fight to the last ship. They would never surrender to primitives like humans. Admiral Nari read their response without emotion. Then she gave the order. Prepare the final offensive. Target the Kresh homeworld. If they won't accept peace, we'll bring them war. The largest fleet in galactic history began to assemble. Human ships, Quellan vessels, Marathi cruisers, Valori fighters. Over 1,000 warships from dozens of species. All united in one purpose. The Kresh Empire had spent 3 centuries crushing anyone who opposed them. Now they were about to learn what it felt like to be on the receiving end. Fleet Commander Hyun stood on the bridge of the Retribution and looked at the assembled fleet. Ships of every size and design, crews from species that had never thought they would see freedom again. This is it, he told his crew. This is what we've been fighting for. Not revenge, not conquest, justice for everyone the Kresh have hurt, for everyone they've killed, for all the species that surrendered because they thought fighting back was impossible. We're showing them it's not impossible. We're showing them that tyrants can fall. Officer Yuna stood at her station, her scarred face set in determination. Officer Ki-hoon checked his special operations teams. Lieutenant Do-hyun prepared his Marines. The Kresh Homeworld Defense Fleet was the largest military force ever assembled in one place. 2,000 warships surrounded their home planet. Orbital defense platforms covered every approach. Ground-based weapons could target anything in orbit. The Kresh had brought everything home for this final stand. Fleet Commander Hyun studied the tactical display aboard the Retribution. His coalition fleet had 1,050 ships. They were outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. Every strategic analysis said this battle couldn't be won. They're broadcasting surrender terms, communications reported. They say if we withdraw now, they'll allow us to keep the worlds we've liberated. They'll even pay reparations, Hyun almost laughed. After 3 centuries of conquest, after destroying countless civilizations, now the Kresh wanted to negotiate. Now they wanted peace, and tell them no, he said. Tell them we're coming. Tell them justice is coming. The battle began at dawn Kresh time. The coalition fleet jumped into the system in waves. They didn't try to match the Kresh formation. Instead, they spread out, attacking from 100 different angles at once. The Kresh had superior numbers, but the coalition had something more important. They had learned. Every species in the coalition had been conquered by the Kresh. They knew Kresh tactics. They knew Kresh weaknesses, and they knew how to exploit them. Quellan ships used electronic warfare to jam Kresh communications. Marathi engineering vessels deployed mobile shields that protected smaller craft. Valori fighters attacked in swarms, overwhelming point defenses. And human ships did what they did best. They hit hard and refused to quit. The battle raged for 3 days. Space around the Kresh homeworld became a graveyard of broken vessels. Both sides took terrible losses. The coalition lost 400 ships. The Kresh lost over 1,000. On the 3rd day, the Kresh defense began to collapse. Too many ships were gone. Too many platforms were destroyed. Their orbital control was failing. Admiral Nari watched from her command ship. She could order the bombardment of the Kresh homeworld. She could do to them what they had done to so many others. Total destruction. Complete extinction, but she didn't. Open a channel to the planet, she ordered. All frequencies. Her message was broadcast to every Kresh citizen. This is Admiral Nari of the United Human Space Navy. Your military has been defeated. Your empire has fallen. But we are not here to destroy you. We are here to stop you. Surrender now. Face justice for your crimes. But survive. We're giving you a choice your victims never had. For 6 hours there was silence. Then a response came from the planetary government. We surrender. The war was over. The Kresh Empire formally dissolved 3 months later. War crimes trials began for the military leadership. Reparations were ordered for every species they had conquered. Restrictions were placed on their military capabilities. The Kresh homeworld would survive, but it would never threaten the galaxy again. The freed species formed a new coalition. Not an empire, but a voluntary alliance. Each world governed itself. Each species kept its freedom. But they would defend each other. They would stand together against any future threat. Humanity's role in the new order was unique. They were the liberators, the ones who had fought when everyone else thought fighting was impossible. Other species looked to them with respect and gratitude, but not all humans were comfortable with that. Archival keeper Teho thought about this as his ship approached HFY's old station. The war was over. The galaxy was at peace, but he couldn't stop thinking about the Velen, about the species that was destroyed because they couldn't fight back. With him was Sora, an archaeologist specializing in lost civilizations. She had volunteered to help catalog and preserve HFY's archive. Do you think she would be happy? Sora asked as they docked with the station. If she could see what happened? Teho thought about that. I think she'd be sad. Sad that it took a war, sad that so many died. But also, yes, I think she'd be happy that her people's fate was avenged. The station was exactly as Teho had left it months before. Silent corridors, flickering lights, and the archive chamber where HFY had spent her final days. They found her there, still seated at her terminal. Her body had been preserved by the station's cold, dry atmosphere. She looked almost peaceful. She died watching the Battle of Sol, Teho said softly. She saw us win. Sora examined the terminal. Data was still stored in its memory cores. Thousands of files, HFY's journal, historical records of the Velen, cultural archives, art, music, philosophy, everything she could save about her people. But there was one more file, dated after the last journal entry. She wrote something else, Sora said. After the battle, Teho activated the file. It was a message, an audio recording in HFY's own voice. To whoever finds this, the recording began. The translation software rendered her words into human language. My name is HFY. I am the last of the Velen. By the time you hear this, I will be dead. I have spent 20 years alone watching the galaxy fall into darkness, watching species after species crushed by the Kresh Empire. I believed hope was dead. I believed that peaceful civilizations could never survive in a violent universe. There was a pause. When HFY spoke again, her voice was different, stronger. But today I witnessed something impossible. A species I have been monitoring. The ones from the third spiral arm, the ones who call themselves humans. They defeated the Kresh. Not just one battle, but a major fleet engagement. They were outnumbered 5-1. They should have been destroyed. But they fought and they won. Another pause. Teho could hear emotion in her voice. I do not know what will happen next. Perhaps the humans will be defeated eventually. Perhaps the Kresh will crush them like they crushed my people. But for one moment, for one shining moment, I saw something I thought I would never see again. I saw resistance succeed. I saw courage triumph. I saw hope. Teho felt tears on his face. Beside him, Sora was crying too. If anyone finds this archive, please preserve it, HFY continued. The Velen did not have time to record everything about our civilization. But what we did preserve is here. Our history, our culture, our dreams. We believed in peace. We believed in understanding. Those beliefs killed us, but they were still worth believing in. A long pause. To the humans, if any of you ever hear this, thank you. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for proving that tyranny doesn't have to win. Thank you for giving me hope in my final days. I die knowing that somewhere out there someone is still fighting. That's enough. That has to be enough. The recording ended. Teho and Sora stood in silence for a long time. Finally, Teho spoke. We need to make this place a memorial, not just for the Velen, but for every species the Kresh destroyed. Every civilization they erased. We need to remember them. Agreed, Sora said. What should we call it? Teho looked at HFY's preserved form, still seated at her terminal after 200 years. The HFY Memorial Archive, a place to remember what was lost, and why we fight to prevent it from happening again. The memorial was completed 6 months later. HFY's station was expanded into a massive facility. Archives from dozens of destroyed civilizations were brought there. Historians, archaeologists, and scholars from across the galaxy came to study and preserve the records. HFY herself was laid to rest in a chamber overlooking space. A simple plaque bore her name and her final message. Visitors came from everywhere to pay their respects. Velen were gone, but they were not forgotten. Fleet Commander Hyun visited the memorial 1 year after the war ended. He had retired from active service. Now he taught at the Naval Academy, training the next generation of officers. He stood in front of HFY's chamber for a long time. Through the viewport, he could see ships passing by. Human vessels, Quellan freighters, Mirathi explorers, dozens of species all free to travel the galaxy without fear. Officer Yuna joined him. She had also retired, though she still bore the scars of war. She worked now with refugees, helping displaced people rebuild their lives. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked. Hyun considered the question. Thousands had died in the war. Entire fleets had been destroyed. The cost had been terrible. Reshva watched her entire species die because they wouldn't fight, he said finally. "We fought and many of us died, but many of us lived, and millions of others who would have died under Kresh rule are now free. Yes, we did the right thing." They stood together in silence, paying respect to the last of the Velen. Across the galaxy, life continued. The wounds of war were healing. New alliances were forming. Trade routes reopened. Art and culture flourished. The dark years of Kresh dominance were becoming history. Admiral Nari remained at her post, though the military was much smaller now. She believed in peace, but she also believed in being prepared. The coalition maintained a defensive fleet, not to conquer but to protect. Never again would peaceful species be left defenseless. Diplomat Do-hyun worked tirelessly to strengthen the bonds between species. He helped draft the charter for the new Galactic Coalition. Its core principles were simple: freedom for all species, mutual defense, and peaceful cooperation. Any species could join, but none would be forced. Officer Ki-hoon led efforts to hunt down remaining Kresh war criminals. Justice was slow but thorough. Those responsible for genocide and atrocities faced trial. Many were imprisoned, some were executed.